Welcome to HH28, where we unravel the secrets of self-discovery and matchmaking. We are Hugh and Heather,
two master holistic guides dedicated to helping you navigate the worlds of numerology, astrology, and personality in pursuit of meaningful connections.
All right, let's dive into today's topic, Geminis.
Yeah.
You've been doing some research, it seems. Lots of articles on Gemini compatibility and, all those classic Gemini traits. And I do love connecting the dots. So think of this as your personalized highlight reel of all things Gemini.
And I have a feeling this is going to be one of our more dynamic highlight reels. Geminis are, well, they're rarely ever boring.
You're telling me. They definitely have that reputation. So you wanted to know about their strengths, their weaknesses, and how they vibe with other signs. But before we unpack all that juicy compatibility stuff, let's start with the foundation here. Like, what makes a Gemini tick? Your research on the symbolism of the twins is actually the perfect place to start.
It's true. The Gemini symbol, Castor and Pollux, those iconic twins, it gives us a lot to unpack. It goes beyond just saying, oh, they're two-faced, which, by the way, isn't true. It's more about understanding that duality, that fascinating ability to flip between being like the life of the party and then suddenly needing some serious solo time. It can be a lot for other signs to understand.
I bet. It's like they have this mental switch.
Right.
1 minute they're out there, the next minute, bam, they're like in their own head, lost in a book or something, or just deep in thought.
Precisely. And this duality is something your research really emphasizes, especially in the context of relationships. You even highlighted that article about, it was a Gemini entrepreneur who really credited their success to being able to switch gears so quickly between brainstorming and strategic planning.
Oh, right. That's a great example of how that dual nature can actually be such a strength and not just, some weird quirk.
Exactly. And it actually ties back to their ruling planet, Mercury, right? The messenger god, who wasn't exactly known for sitting still. This planet governs communication, intellect, and it's infused Geminis with this insatiable curiosity and a way with words that's frankly kind of unfair to the rest of us.
Okay, so it's more than just being chatty. I mean, anyone who's met a Gemini knows they can talk. But you're saying there's a deeper connection between Mercury and how Geminis actually process information and connect with the world around them?
Absolutely. And this is where their air sign energy comes into play. You see, air signs, they're all about intellect, communication, that constant flow of ideas. And Geminis, well, they embody this through their love of learning, debating, and just soaking up knowledge, like sponges, really. In fact, your research even mentioned that Geminis are often drawn to careers in, writing, teaching, or anything that lets them use their words to connect with people. Does that resonate with you?
100%. It's like they have this internal need to understand and then share what they've learned, but always with their own spin on it.
Exactly. It's never just, regurgitating facts. It's about making connections, finding new angles, and of course, keeping things interesting. And that brings us to arguably the most compelling part of your research, Gemini strengths and weaknesses. You highlighted some pretty specific points that I think are very telling.
Oh, yeah. This is the part that really jumped out at me from your notes, especially because, as we were just saying, Geminis often have these traits that can be seen as both a good and a bad thing.
Right. Like their adaptability. Geminis are so good at rolling with the punches, thriving in new situations, and just connecting with all kinds of people. Your research even mentioned how many Geminis excel in careers where there's constant change, like project management or entrepreneurship.
Which makes total sense because they're not afraid of the unknown. In fact, they're probably already 3 steps ahead figuring out how to make the unknown work for them.
Precisely. However, this adaptability, it can also be their Achilles heel. Because they can see so many possibilities, they can also struggle with indecisiveness. It's like they're always weighing the options, analyzing every angle, which can honestly be exhausting for them and anyone trying to make a decision with them.
So that double-edged sword thing, again, it's a strength and a weakness just depending on how it's channeled. And that reminds me of another point you highlighted, their humor. Geminis are notorious for their wit and their ability to find humor in almost any situation. But I noticed your research also touched on how this can sometimes backfire.
It's true. Their humor is usually a major asset. It helps them diffuse tension, connect with people, keep things light. However, because they tend to process things intellectually first, their humor can come across as a defense mechanism, especially in those really emotionally charged situations.
So it's like they use humor to deflect instead of actually dealing with the heavier stuff.
Exactly. And it's not because they're intentionally being insensitive or uncaring. It's more that their natural inclination is to kind of to intellectualize those emotions rather than just sitting with them. And this can be particularly tricky in relationships, which
Which seems like the perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive, Gemini compatibility. You provided this fascinating chart that ranks which signs are most compatible with Geminis. Are you ready to break that down?
oh, I love a good compatibility deep dive, especially with a sign as well as complex as Gemini. And I have a feeling this chart you've got is about to get really interesting.
Oh, it definitely is. But before we jump into like who clicks best with our Gemini friends,
Yeah.
I want to circle back to something you said earlier about Geminis using humor as kind of like a defense mechanism. You're right, that is tricky, especially in relationships. Because on the one hand, their wit and their like lightheartedness are a huge part of their charm. But on the other hand, it can create distance when they're not careful.
Exactly. And it's not just about romantic relationships either. This can really show up in their friendships, family dynamics, even at work in professional settings. So for anyone who's trying to really build a deeper connection with the Gemini, understanding this tendency is key. It's not about forcing them to be someone they're not. It's about recognizing when that humor might be masking something a little deeper and then, creating a space where they feel safe enough to open up, at their own pace.
That's such great advice because it's so easy to kind of fall into that trap of thinking, oh, they're just always cracking jokes. They don't take anything seriously. But that's not necessarily true, is it?
Not at all. In fact, Geminis can be surprisingly sensitive and deep thinkers when they actually let their guard down. Remember that dual nature we were talking about? They experience the full spectrum of emotions just like anyone else. They just might process and express them a little differently. And this is where understanding their communication style is so important, which luckily is another area where your research is spot on.
Okay, so let's talk communication. We know Geminis are ruled by Mercury, the planet of communication, so it makes sense that they're such, skilled communicators. But you mentioned earlier that there's a deeper layer to this, right? It's not just about being articulate or witty. It's about how they use language to connect with the world around them.
Absolutely. And one of the most interesting things your research highlighted was how Geminis use communication as a way to actually learn and grow. You mentioned that article about how they love to debate, play devil's advocate, even if they don't necessarily disagree with you. It's like they're constantly testing out different perspectives, gathering information from multiple angles, using conversation as a tool for intellectual stimulation.
That's so true. I have a Gemini friend who does this all the time. We'll be having a conversation, and he'll suddenly switch sides just to argue the other point of view. And it used to drive me crazy, but now I realize he's not trying to be difficult. He's just he's trying to understand, all sides of the story.
Exactly. And this is something to keep in mind, especially when you're in a disagreement with a Gemini. It's not always about being right or wrong. It's about, having that mental sparring match that allows them to see things from a different angle.
So instead of getting defensive, you're saying it's better to kind of lean into the debate and see it as an opportunity for growth and understanding.
Exactly. And this brings us back to the importance of embracing their need for intellectual stimulation. Remember that Gemini mind is always buzzing, always looking for the next challenge. If you can find ways to kind of engage them intellectually, whether it's through conversation, shared interests, or even just giving them the space to pursue their own intellectual pursuits, you'll be well on your way to building a strong and fulfilling relationship with them.
This is all making so much sense, and it actually ties in perfectly with what we were about to talk about.
Understanding their compatibility with other signs can be so helpful because while every Gemini is unique, certain signs are naturally more equipped to kind of handle that whirlwind energy, and others, well, not so much.
Now, the chart you provided highlighted air signs and fire signs as generally good matches for Geminis. Can you break down why that is?
Absolutely. So with air signs like Libra and Aquarius, it's all about that shared intellectual connection. These signs speak the same language. They love to talk, debate, and, explore new ideas together. It's a very mentally stimulating and engaging pairing that often leads to a strong sense of mutual understanding and respect.
So it's like they just get each other, like a fundamental level.
Exactly. Now, fire signs like Aries and Leo, they bring a different kind of energy to the table. They're passionate, energetic, always up for an adventure. And this actually complements Geminis quite well because it feeds their need for excitement and keeps them on their toes.
That makes sense. Geminis thrive on spontaneity, so having a partner who's always down to try new things and explore the world with them is definitely a plus. But what about those not-so-compatible signs? Your research mentioned a few potential challenges with earth signs and water signs. What's the dynamic there?
Well, with earth signs like Taurus and Virgo, the challenge often lies in their differing approaches to life. Earth signs are grounded, practical, and they really value stability and routine. Geminis, on the other hand, are all about change, adaptability, going with the flow. And this can sometimes lead to, clashes, especially when it comes to things like making decisions or sticking to plans.
So it's like the earth sign is trying to ground the Gemini, and the Gemini is like, nope, I'm out of here. I've got a million other things I want to do today.
That's a great way to put it. And then with water signs like Cancer and Pisces, the challenge often lies in their emotional styles. Water signs are deeply emotional and sensitive, while Geminis tend to, process their emotions intellectually. And this can sometimes lead to misunderstandings, especially if the water sign feels like the Gemini isn't being emotionally available or supportive.
So it's not that Geminis don't have feelings, it's just that they express them differently. And sometimes that could be difficult for water signs to, navigate.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance and understanding each other's needs and communication styles, and that's true for any relationship, regardless of astrological signs. But having that astrological awareness can give you a roadmap, so to speak, to help you navigate those potential challenges more effectively.
I love that analogy. It's like having a guidebook that tells you, hey, there might be some bumps in the road ahead, but here's how to prepare for them. And speaking of guidebooks, your research actually included some really practical tips for anyone who wants to, master the art of being in a relationship with a Gemini.
And I have a feeling those tips are about to come in handy.
You bet they are. And based on what we've unpacked so far, it seems like embracing their need for freedom is absolutely crucial. You even highlighted that one article that called it the oxygen for Geminis in relationships.
Spot on. It's not that Geminis don't want to be coupled up or connected. They crave that just like anyone else, but they have this innate need for mental and often even physical space, to explore, experiment, kind of do their own thing. And that can be hard for some signs to really grasp, especially those who are naturally more, routine oriented or even emotionally expressive.
It's like trying to bottle up a lightning storm, right? They just need that room to crackle and spark.
Yeah. Sure.
Your research actually had a great analogy. Encouraging a Gemini to fly free and then being there to celebrate their adventures when they return.
I love that. It's about finding that balance, right, between supporting their independence and nurturing the connection. And that leads us to another key point from your research, communication, which, as we've established, is basically a Gemini superpower. But you specifically wanted to know how to navigate those times when their communication style, it kind of creates friction in a relationship.
Right, because even though they're ruled by Mercury, the planet of communication, it doesn't mean those conversations are always smooth sailing. In fact, their love for playful banter and, even intellectual debate, it can sometimes be misinterpreted, especially by partners who are more heart-centered in their communication.
It's true. Geminis can sometimes intellectualize their emotions using humor or wordplay to kind of deflect from vulnerability. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just their way of processing. But for the people who love them, it's crucial to recognize when that lighthearted energy might be masking something deeper and just, create a safe space for them to open up at their own pace.
So patience is key. And I love that point in your research about how Geminis often express love and affection through acts of service or even just sharing their latest intellectual discoveries.
Yeah.
It's not always about grand romantic gestures. It's those smaller consistent actions that show that they're thinking of you, that they want to share their world with you.
Exactly. And that goes both ways. For our Gemini listeners out there, remember that, clear, direct communication about your needs is crucial. Don't be afraid to tell your loved ones how you're feeling and what you need from them, even if it feels a bit vulnerable or out of character.
Such great advice for everyone, really. But especially in the context of, navigating those inevitable bumps in the road with a Gemini. Because let's be real, relationships are a dance, and sometimes you step on each other's toes, but with the right, tools and understanding, those missteps can actually make the dance stronger.
Beautifully said. And this deep dive has reminded me of something important. Whether you're a Gemini or you love a Gemini, the key to a thriving relationship, it really is curiosity. Yeah. Stay curious about each other, about yourselves, and about the ever-evolving dynamics of your connection. That's where the real growth happens.
So true. And with that, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of Geminis. Hopefully our listeners walking away with a deeper understanding of this dynamic and multifaceted sign, and maybe even a few aha moments about their own approach to relationships.
Absolutely. And remember, the journey of understanding Geminis, and ourselves for that matter, it's ongoing. There's always something new to discover.
Couldn't agree more. So, to our listeners, keep exploring those depths, keep asking those questions, and keep those conversations flowing. And if you ever need another deep dive, well, you know where to find us.